how I cured my chronic pain, and I'm on a mission to cure yours. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I have a lot of new followers on the channel. I really appreciate how the channel's grown over the years. So I figured I'd do another video, an in-depth video on my experience with chronic pain, what I went through, and how I cured myself. Now in this video, I do want to put a disclaimer that parts of my story are very dark. And I am going to talk about suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. So I just want to mention that because I know it can be a trigger for people. It is part of my story, so I'm going to share about it. But if that's triggering for you, you don't have to watch this video. Now, personally, my name's Tanner, if you're new to the channel. I had chronic pain pretty widespread, debilitating chronic pain for about 3.5 years. Many years ago now. And I was able to heal using a mind-body approach by treating the brain and nervous system using therapeutic interventions. I didn't treat my physical body, I treated my brain and nervous system. And I do believe there's such great hope for so many people with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic dizziness, or other chronic symptoms in healing themselves, in eliminating their symptoms by treating the brain and nervous system. But we need to shift because we live in a medicalized world and we're so hyper-focused on treating the body with any pain or symptom that we're experiencing. And most of the time, it has really poor results in actually reducing it. Now, I've been on a mission since I recovered from chronic pain to spread this message to the world, to share it with all of you. So I have free content on this YouTube channel. I put a lot of time and effort into the free content. I know I get so many warm, kind-hearted messages from all of you about how useful it is. And so, part of my business is providing free content on YouTube and in my podcast with my partner, Anne. Now, I also provide therapy to people with chronic pain or symptoms that are located in certain provinces in Canada. And I also have a digital course. So if you're finding some of the free content's not enough, feel free to reach out to myself through those links to learn more about that. Now I want to really dive into my story. So I always tell people chronic pain doesn't develop usually from one event. Chronic pain and symptoms, it's not one event that you just manage to develop chronic symptoms from. They develop over a lifetime. And for myself, I've had a lot of struggles. I've faced a lot of adversity in my life, as many of you have probably faced in your lives that are watching this video. From a young age, I was very sensitive boy, that's for sure. And my son, who is almost 7, is very similar. He's a sensitive, warm-hearted, compassionate little guy. And I was very much like that. But early on, I was bullied in school, physically and emotionally, pretty constant from elementary school all the way up to high school. And for myself, this bullying really caused a trauma response in my nervous system. I felt shut down for a lot of my childhood. I was shut down, I was in despair, I was just numb, or I was in this high sympathetic, very anxious, panicky kind of mode. And so that's how I developed as a child. I went through that and I kept it all to myself. I didn't share what I was going through with my parents. I didn't share it with even the friends that I did have. And so I was constantly dysregulated. And nervous system dysregulation, similar to chronic pain and symptoms, are very interlinked. It doesn't usually happen from one event. It can, like a very big traumatic event, but your nervous system, your brain, it's developed over your lifetime. And from a young age, I was constantly in a state of survival. Now, in my teenage years, I began to cope with the chronic dysregulation, fight, flight, freeze, or shut down mode that I was in. And I coped by using drugs and alcohol. I remember the first time I drank alcohol. It was quite this miraculous moment. It was the first time I had felt calm in so many years. It was the first time I felt happy in so many years. And I think I was maybe about 14 or so at the time. And at that point, why wouldn't I keep using it? So very quickly, I began to drink every day. I started to incorporate various different drugs as well. And it did help me cope at the time. Was it the healthiest way of coping? No, 100%. And that's how I coped as I started to move through my adolescent years. At the time, part of my story that I don't share too much about, I did have a eating disorder develop. And this developed from me being overweight when I was much younger and being bullied about it. And so my addiction to drugs and alcohol and my eating disorder had this really nasty spiraling effect on my life. And so by the time I was 17, my life had deteriorated a lot. I have very loving parents, and I was disconnected from them. I moved out of my home when I was probably 17, maybe 16. And my parents took action, and they put me in a long-term facility for drug and alcohol substance abuse issues. And I was there for a long period of time. And this was kind of one of my first interactions with therapy. And I recovered. I've been sober ever since. I was in that treatment center for about 8 months. It was a really long period in my adolescent years. It was the first time where I started to feel safe with others. I started to feel connected to this other group of adolescents who were also recovering from substance use issues. And I have some really fond memories, maybe not at the beginning because I didn't want to be there. It was mandated, but by the end, I was very committed to sobriety, and I have been sober ever since. So that's many, many years ago that I've been sober, and I'm very grateful for that treatment center and for the group of friends I developed from that. When I got out of treatment, I was pushed back into this big, scary world. And so I was really still struggling. And a lot of the skills I learned, I just didn't have a connection with anymore. I started resisting my emotions. I pushed everything down. I never used drugs and alcohol again, but I started to cope by having perfectionistic tendencies. Always being perfect in school. Again, still trying to have a perfect body. And that was a lot of pressure. In my young 20s, I felt an immense amount of pressure on me to be the best at everything I did. And that really wreaked havoc on my nervous system. I still really struggled with anxiety. But there was some happy moments. I want to be clear, it was my life was significantly better than before I went to the treatment center. It was significantly better, but there was still some pretty big mental health issues going on. Now, in my young 20s, I was training for a triathlon. This was one of my first triathlons that I was going to do, and I was excited for it, and I was training a lot. I was being perfectionistic about this as well. I was running 50, 60 kilometers a week, getting really, really conditioned. And at the time, looking back, I know now, I was getting more serious with my partner, Anne. I was planning to propose to her in the near future. I changed my major in school, so I am a therapist, a master's level registered social worker. And I was in my undergrad, and I had changed my major. I was moving in the direction of becoming a therapist. And again, life just felt so big and overwhelming and scary to me. And at the time, I was going through a bit of a spiritual crisis around some of my belief systems, and that made me feel more dysregulated. And then all of a sudden, when I was running one day, I started to get pain in my right knee. And at first I didn't think much of it. I wasn't overwhelmed by it. Like, it wasn't really, really extreme. I went to physio, I went to chiro, I rested it. And no matter what I did, it just wasn't getting better. And as months went on, I got more panicked about it. And then I started to experience pain in my left knee. And then I believe it went to my shoulders. And over about 3.5 years, my pain spread. It spread throughout my body, widespread, back, hips, legs, arms, head. It was all over the place. And part of my healing, it wasn't one of my main symptoms, but I also had quite a bit of a fatigue issue by the end. And so I did every treatment, I did every scan, I went to every specialist you could imagine, and no matter what I did, it wasn't getting better. Later on in my journey, I was taking pain meds. And one thing that happened as my chronic pain and symptoms developed and progressed is I had this trauma response in my nervous system. At first, it was more fight or flight. I was anxious and angry and so hyper fixated. I was thinking about it 80% of the day. And it consumed my life. And all I thought the solution was going to doctors, trying a new physical treatment. And I felt hopeless. And so probably about the last year and a half, when I was in chronic pain, I just completely shut down. I remember Anne, my partner, could even be in the home. And I wasn't even aware if she was there. I was numb. I was in despair. I was incredibly depressed. And I was just dissociative. And when we talk about a trauma response to chronic pain or symptoms, what I call it is sensitization trauma. This is the trauma that occurs, the fight, flight, freeze, shutdown response that occurs to the onset or progression of chronic pain and symptoms. And so that got worse and worse. And I remember, thoughts of suicide started to develop because I didn't think there was hope. I became incredibly suicidal progressively the longer it went on. Now, pretty close to when I found a mind-body approach and started to treat my brain and nervous system, right before that, I had a really dark period right around Christmas time. And on Christmas Day, after my partner went to bed, I decided this was it. I'm gonna end my life. This is too much for me to handle. And so I went out, I ran into some snags. It was really cold in Calgary. And so luckily when I went outside, fortunately for myself, my car didn't start. And things progressed throughout that evening, and the police were called and different things. And I was at just such a low point. For anyone watching this video, I totally empathize. I understand. That's why I've made my clinic, my course, and provide even free content for people where there are financial barriers, because I want to give this message out to the world. Now, shortly after this, I had a conversation with a friend. And my friend had said, maybe by next year, you won't have pain anymore. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's been 3.5 years and this has just gotten worse and worse. But there was a little bit of hope. There was a little bit of hope of maybe there's something out there that I haven't tried that's completely different from all these physical treatments, these medications. And so I went searching. I searched and I searched. I found some weird things that didn't work. And eventually late one night when I couldn't sleep because of my pain, I found a YouTube video and they talked about Dr. Sarno. Now, Dr. Sarno was a doctor in the 70s and 80s that had a real big belief and treated people by treating their brain and nervous system. He treated people by treating them psychologically instead of treating their physical body. And I want to be clear, when we talk about neuroplastic pain on my channel, which is what I had, neuroplastic pain occurs when your brain and nervous system is stuck basically in a state of survival. And as a result, your brain and nervous system starts to produce a meaningful message of chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic dizziness. One of the most common symptoms of emotional dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation, trauma is chronic pain and symptoms, and it is not because the body is damaged. And I started to dive into this content. I read everything I could, some of the things from Dr. Schubiner that were out there as well. And at first I wasn't committed. I was a little bit angry. I was like, they're calling my pain fake, which if you're listening, I'm not saying your pain or symptom is fake. It is not. It is 100% real. There is no difference in how people experience pain, whether you sprain your ankle or whether your brain and nervous system is stuck in a state of survival. They have done fMRI studies. We experience it in the same way. And so I started to really dive in after a couple of months into this. And the way I healed is what I've kind of built my clinic on and my course on. 5 main areas. And I have a whole video on these 5 main areas in detail of how you can start to utilize them. So I will link that to the top. Check that out if you're new to this channel or if you need a helpful reminder. But I did 5 main things, 5 main areas I focused on. Changing your thoughts and beliefs. I needed to change my thoughts and beliefs about my body, about my pain sensations. This was essential. I had believed for so long that there was something so wrong with my body that I wasn't going to get better. And so that needed to shift. And it did. I read everything I could. There was a website called TMS Wiki. It's still up. But I really started to learn, hey, my pain is not because my body is damaged. And a lot of chronic pain and symptoms are not because the body is physically damaged. And so I changed my thoughts and beliefs. I wrote down evidence. If you want help looking for evidence, if your pain or symptoms are neuroplastic, I will link a video to the top. It's an old video, so I apologize for the poor quality, but check that video out because I go through the criteria for neuroplastic pain and symptoms in it. So you can start gathering evidence. But I started to gather evidence and I started to remind myself consistently. Every time I had a fear thought, a despairing thought about my pain, I reminded myself, hey, I'm safe. My body is not damaged in this way. This is my brain and nervous system, and I can heal. And I say this wholeheartedly. I do believe there is a path forward for people healing. It just takes some exploring, and it takes some playing around with things. And that's my mission. That's my mission I've been on since healing. I want to help you heal. I know the freedom I felt as I started to heal. Now, the second area we talk about is brain retraining. It is exposure. By the end of my pain, I was not moving my body at all. I was locked in my basement. I could barely walk for 2 minutes. I could barely move my arms. And so I needed to retrain my brain that I was safe to physically move, that I was safe to walk, to run even, to lift weights again. And there's so many brain retraining techniques I have on this channel. I'll link a somatic tracking to the top that you can check out. But somatic tracking and brain retraining is part, but it's also the graded exposure. I had to start to move my body again. And I can say, without a doubt, this was possible for me because I was able, over a number of months, to start to fully use my body again without limitations. And that is such a freeing feeling that I want to give all of you. Now, the third area that I talk about is processing of emotions. Whether you use journaling, Nicole Sachs, journal speak, some people do it like that. I have a lot of somatic emotion practices that I utilize in my approach, and I did a lot of somatic work with my emotions. So I'll link a step-by-step for somatically processing your emotions to the top that you can all go and check out. A lot of benefit there, learning how to do this. But emotions and chronic pain and symptoms are very linked. And the more we resist emotions and push them down, like I did since I was a child, the more we just become dysregulated and the more pain and symptoms are produced. And so we have to start approaching emotions and processing them. And I did a lot of this work when I was healing. I really committed to focusing on my emotional state, processing it, working through things. Now, the fourth area I talk about is nervous system regulation and processing of trauma. So, nervous system dysregulation, fight, flight, freeze, shutdown. When I say dysregulated, these are prolonged states in this way. I was in them since I was a young child, as many of you probably were as well. And I needed to start to regulate my nervous system. I had to start connecting with my body, connecting with it deeply, becoming embodied, learning to take cues off my body, learning what my safety signals are, what helped me actually create safety. I had to start to use somatic practices, Qigong, which I have lots on this channel. I'll link some of that to the top as well. But I needed to use some of that because that's how I started to create a more regulated nervous system, which has helped me for many years maintain my healing. Outside of a few small moments where I've had some flares, for many, many years, I've maintained my healing from chronic pain and symptoms and don't have them anymore, partly in credit to regulating the nervous system. Now, processing of trauma, it's important when we talk about processing of trauma. Many people need to do this with a therapist. Some people, if they take a course such as mine, can find a path forward doing it on their own. Now, I was training to be a therapist at the time, so I had a bit of an edge on this, but I also went to therapy as well, which was very beneficial to process trauma. Even if your trauma happened 2 decades before your pain and symptoms started, there is a link. It is connected. We know when people face childhood adversity, traumatic experiences, they are much more likely later in life to develop chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and other chronic symptoms. And so I did a lot of deep emotional work, nervous system work, processing of trauma that was very beneficial in reducing and eliminating my chronic pain symptoms. Now, the last area I talk about is social safety. Now, social safety, the way you live life. Are you in patterns of perfectionism, people-pleasing, excessive conscientiousness? I was in all of these. I needed to change that. I needed to change the way I was approaching life. Now, we're not to blame for these coping mechanisms. They developed as a result of adversity you faced earlier in life, as they did for me. But we have to start changing the way we approach life. And, I've had some periods where I've backpedaled, unfortunately, with that. And I've had to get back on track because these are very ingrained patterns. They take some time to change. But changing the way you live life, but also the factors in your life, school, work, family, friends, your community, are they sending signals of safety or danger to you? This matters. It really does. If you use all the brain retraining, exposure, emotion, nervous system work, but you are in a life that is constantly sending signals of danger, it's going to be hard to heal. And these are harder changes to make. They take time. And we have to make big life decisions. I can't make those for you. I had to make some of these. I had to change, my job at the time. I needed to change certain friends. I let go of certain friends. I don't regret those decisions. They helped create a sense of safety. Now, my life now, by doing all of these things and staying consistent with the work for many, many years, I don't have chronic pain. I can move my body however I want. It's quite an amazing feeling, but it's not even that. It's set the stage for me to feel so regulated and calm. Even this morning when I was walking my dog, Darla, I walked her to Tim Hortons and back. I just felt this sense of calm and ease in my system that I never had access to before. And even when I do get dysregulated or have difficult emotions, I can approach them. I can be with them in my body. Even great despair, terror, or rage, I can sit with it and actually feel safe with all the sensations in my body. So you can heal your pain and symptoms, but there are so many more benefits to this work than just your symptoms reducing. I feel such a great level of regulation and ability to be in my body now. And I've been able to cultivate amazing relationships. My relationship with my partner, Anne, is so amazing. I'm so grateful for that. I have 2 kids. My daughter is 4 and my son is almost 7. And I have amazing relationships with them where I can play with them, where I can connect with them that even as an adolescent, before my pain, I wasn't able to do. And even my career, my clinic, my online course, I run 2 businesses. And it's not out of a state of fear or pressure anymore. It's out of a state of passion and creativity and excitement. And is it hard sometimes? 100%. I'm not here to sell you a lie that my life is perfect. It's not. There are rough periods, but I'm able to be in my body with them. There are periods of great despair or tragedy, but I'm able to work through them without having pain. And so this is what I want for all of you. I'm on a mission to support people in curing their chronic pain and symptoms. So if you're new to this channel, I welcome you. Please put your questions or comments down below. Check out my other videos, and I will talk to you all later. Take care.